All for coming out today. My name is Ted Dabrowski, and I'm the Vice President of Policy at the Illinois Policy Institute. On Wednesday, the City Council will be asked to approve the largest property tax increase in Chicago's recent history. Proponents of this tax increase claim that the city has no other option and that city homeowners can stomach the tax increases because they pay lower tax rates than homeowners in neighboring suburbs. The proponents of the tax hike are not giving Chicago residents the full story. And before aldermen vote on this tax increase, taxpayers deserve to be spoken to honestly. The Illinois Policy Institute conducted an analysis of all the taxes, fees, and fines that city residents face and compared those to what residents around the state also face. And this is what we found. Even before this property tax is approved, Chicagoans have the highest tax burden of any residents in the entire state of Illinois. Beyond the property tax, Chicagoans face more than 30 different taxes and a multitude of fees. Let me give you some examples. There's an amusement tax, a bottled water tax, an electricity use tax, a fountain soft drink tax, 2 different cell phone taxes, one on regular usage and one for 911. There's a liquor tax, as we all know about, parking, huge parking taxes, restaurant tax fees, even a fee for $1 a fee for every tire that you buy. The list is long, and when you add the fines and the others, it's long. Today, Chicagoans have a tax burden of $1,600 each. This is just city taxes and fees. This does not include county taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, or any other resident taxes. Nor does it include taxes to Chicago Public Schools or the Chicago Park District. So in Chicago, every person pays City Hall $1,600 in taxes. To put that in perspective, Chicagoans pay nearly 3 times more than residents in Naperville, 2 times more than residents in Springfield, 2 times more than residents in Rockford, and nearly 20% more than residents in Evanston. Chicago is a world-class city with world-class assets. It can be a beacon of prosperity, and it can achieve financial stability. But that won't happen by drowning its residents and its businesses with more and more taxes. Wednesday's tax hike won't improve city services. It won't make our schools any better. It won't change how operations at City Hall work, and it won't make our streets safer. It only pays for old bills and allows the mayor and aldermen to avoid the structural reforms that need to take place. Chicagoans already pay the highest tax bill in the state of Illinois, and the tax hike that aldermen will vote on Wednesday will only make the situation worse. City officials owe it to taxpayers to be honest about their tax bill and to go back to the drawing board and identify real reforms that will put the city on a sustainable path to recovery. So thank you, and with that, I'll take any questions you have on the report that we've released.
What are the reforms that can be done locally?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things that you guys all talk about. There's a lot of patronage that we know about. There's a lot of contracts that are not affordable for the city. There are a lot of contracts that don't make a lot of sense. You guys write about all those. But I think what's the important point today, Charles, is that aldermen be honest with their taxpayers, and that the city taxpayers are the most burdened of any residents in the state of Illinois, and that any tax increase will only make things worse.
What's dishonest about what's being proposed now?
Well, what's happening is that many people are, the proponents of the tax hike, what they're saying is that property taxes are low in Chicago because they're comparing them to the suburbs. But what they're not doing is they're not adding up all the taxes and fees that Chicagoans pay. And when you do that, then aldermen should be saying, look, you are already the most taxed residents in the state of Illinois by far, and we're going to increase your taxes more. But they should not be, the narrative should not be out there that's out there. The narrative should not be that, hey, property taxes are low, so therefore residents can stomach more tax increases, because that's not the total picture. The total picture is when you add up all the taxes and fees, Chicagoans are the most taxed. Yeah, I can put some flavor on that. You know, Mayors Daley and Rahm Emanuel have avoided, for the most part, property tax increases. But what's not talked about is over time, they've taxed through the nickel and diming that's been done over the last 20 years. They've added all these different tax increases. And so to ignore those, which now are much more substantial than the property tax collection in Chicago, is unfair.
Would you not pay the amounts that the mayor wants to pay for police and fire pensions?
I'm sorry.
Would you not pay the amounts for police and fire pensions the mayor wants to start paying in this budget?
Well, I think what we're saying is that what the mayor and the city council need to do is open up the contracts, look at the efficiencies that could be had, and find more and be more demanding of themselves before they raise record tax hikes on the residents that are already the highest taxed in the city.
That wasn't my question. My question is, would you not put the additional amounts into the police and fire pension funds of the mayor's proposal?
Well, I think what we need to do is try to meet the obligations of the state, obviously, and the city. Clearly, the city needs to meet its obligations on pensions, but everything else that it does. What we're saying is that it needs to find the money through efficiencies and reforms rather than just raising taxes. Because,
Name some efficiencies that would come up with anywhere close to $588 million.
well, I think what we need to ask them is to come back and say, here's what they are. But, Greg, you write about this stuff all the time, right? There's a lot of inefficiencies. There's contracts that don't make sense. You've written about the teacher pension pickups, for example. The city has spent over $1.5 billion on teacher pension pickups at CPS in the last decade. Going forward, it's about $150 million a year. That's a place where I would start right there. That's a win for taxpayers, and it's the right kind of reform that the city needs to see. But again, Greg, I think the bigger issue is the honesty about where we stand in Chicago. There's too many people writing that the taxes are low, and so therefore it's okay. That's not the honest presentation that needs to be given to taxpayers. When the aldermen go in and vote on Wednesday, and when they walk into those chambers, they need to know that they're about to raise taxes on the most overtaxed citizens in Chicago, in the state.
You say that's fiction. Is it incorrect that the property tax rate in Chicago, the percentage of the value of the property that you pay, is even after this would be among the very lowest within Cook County?
Well, so Greg, that's what.
Wrong?
Oh, I'm not saying that the fact is wrong. I will say two things. One is that you've got to look at all the other taxes because, Naperville and Rockford and all these other cities don't pay, I don't know if they pay a tire fee, but they don't pay that whole list of 30 different taxes that Chicagoans pay. So I think to the point, Greg, is if you want to do a real like-to-like comparison, talk about the tax burden, not about just property taxes, right? Because if you don't add them all up, then I think we're doing a disservice to the citizens of Chicago.
Now, you're looking at per capitas, and did you at all look at, in your report, I haven't had a chance to read it all yet, did you at all look at percentages?
Oh, absolutely. So,
Rates?
yeah, but still, Chicago is number one by far. The interesting number two
Percentage
of household income, yes. If you do the household taxes as a percentage of household income, that's not directly in the report, but we'll provide that to you. What's amazing is only Cicero is the one that stands out that's close to Chicago. The rest are much, much lower. And again, that's another way of showing that burden on Chicagoans is really high.
You mentioned the teacher pension pickup, that the mayor's property tax, as you know, is for the city funds. Give us 2 or 3 examples of big dollar cuts that you think are there to be made.
Well, again, Greg, we could try to debate what those are. We've had a long track record of proposing things. One of the things we came out with last year was a fundamental pension reform plan that we believe is constitutional. That is one thing that can be done. Of course, it needs to be debated. But the second thing that can be done tomorrow that has no constitutional issues is a 401k for all new employees. I think that's the kind of signal that Rahm Emanuel and the City Council need to send to the residents of Chicago. Hey, I'm serious about reforms before I raise your taxes.
Would that save any money in the short term?
That wouldn't save that much money in the short term. But I'm saying it's the kind of reform that ends, because I think here's what happens, Greg. If we don't pass any reforms and we just flood the city with more money, then that does nothing to change the cost curve between revenues and expenses. And we're just back to where we started. 2 or 3 years from now, we'll be there again. And I think we've been here before. And Greg, just to your point earlier, I wanted to point out on this graphic, which is this kind of light, I don't know what color that is, teal, those are the other taxes outside of property taxes that the average Chicagoan pays today. Nowhere in the rest of the state will you see any of those kind of taxes and fees paid. On top of that, you've got the penalties and fines. So when you add all that up, that's more, those two are more than the combined tax revenues of all these other cities that are in the top 10 in Illinois. And that's significant. And that's the part that I think is being ignored.
Slightly different subject. There's a controversy at City Hall right now regarding the Uber drivers. I just wanted to draw on the free market philosophies of the Institute. What is the position on ride-sharing services versus the taxis and the expansion of the ride-sharing services in the city?
Well, Charles, I won't comment deeply on that because it's not the focus of this discussion. However, we strongly support the ride-sharing companies. We think that they're offering more alternatives to people. It's offering more job alternatives to the people that take up Uber and Lyft. It's providing greater access to people in communities that don't see taxis today. We think it's a win-win for everybody, certainly for the consumers. It is a bit of a shake-up in the industry, but it's required, and I think it's a win-win for Chicagoans, job creation, and those people who can't get a taxi to come into their community. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. But again, we can talk about Uber. This kind of tax increase will wipe out any benefits from Uber. Any other question? Sure, no problem. So I would say, just in summary, I want to be extremely clear about this. Even before this massive property tax hike, Chicagoans are already the most taxed in this state. And I think it behooves the aldermen and the mayor and those who are proponents of the tax hike to make sure that before they propose this tax hike that they're honest with the taxpayers of Chicago, and so that everybody knows what we're going into, especially because this is a world-class city, and we want to preserve that. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out.